feel like we haven't done this. Hi guys, it's Kira and Jesse from Plaid, and we are here with Let's Paint Live, where we teach you to paint a painting in just about an hour. And tonight we are going to paint spring palms. So we have this beautiful floral tropical leaf painting that Jesse did, and we are going to teach you in just about an hour. So if you are joining us brand new, our Let's Paint Live program is just one part of our entire Let's Paint program, where we have free online education content available to you. So we've got Jesse, who teaches our Let's Paint Live, which is always the first Thursday of the month, where we have a fun painting and you can paint along with us, or when you have time to make some me time on your own, you can watch this on demand on our Facebook channel after the live, or on our YouTube channel the next day. We also have Andy Jones, who has a whole Let's Paint Color Lessons program that's actually going to be brand new next month, so we're very excited about that. And we also have Donna Dewberry, who has a brand new program that launched this year, which is Wreaths of the Month. So don't forget to check out plaidonline.com/letspaint to check out the entire Let's Paint program. Also this year, something different we've done is the team has pulled together a kit of 24 paints and brushes that you can purchase to paint along with us the entire year. So Jesse will be pulling from that palette of the 24 paints to create the paintings each month. So if you click the link below, you can purchase and you'll get your 24 paint bottles and your brushes, so you'll be set to go. And you'll just
every
have to
month
get your
you'll just have the paints already.
And I think actually there might be a link to purchase the wood surfaces that we typically use. You can use a canvas or illustration board, but we use a 12 by 12 wood canvas typically in our paint nights. So also, while you're watching, don't forget to hashtag Let's Paint and Plaid Crafts, because we want to see what you're making, and comment. And also, if you comment during the live, you will be entered to win one of our Let's Paint Live kits. So you could actually win all 24 paints and the brushes, and you'll be set to go. And it's a great way to have all your supplies. It's a great gift if you want to give to someone. Or, again, if you have your friends over, you guys can all share. So that's a great way to do it and have your paint party in your own home. You know, it's great. It's still winter. It's been very rainy here. So it's a great way to have all your supplies, get your friends, and do it in the privacy of your own home when you have time, and relax and paint.
Yeah, totally.
So Jesse's going to get started on our spring palms, and I'll check back in with you guys.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Kira. All right, so first I'm going to go over the supplies we have. As Kira said, 12 by 12 wood canvas, which is under here. You can see beneath. And then I have this pattern that we've created for you guys to kind of help. This is a little bit more detailed of a design. So just kind of to help make sure we all have a similar composition, just because it's a little trickier than some of our other paint nights. And you can print this pattern out on plaidonline.com. It's with our supply list. So you can download the pattern and print it out for free. And it comes in 4 pages. So you just cut them out and it tells you 1, 2, 3, 4, just how to line them up, and it'll fit your canvas perfectly. So go ahead and print that out. I also have some transfer paper here to transfer our pattern. If you don't have transfer paper, you can take a graphite pencil and rub it on the back of your paper and then transfer it that way, and it works really similarly to transfer paper. So that's a little trick if you don't have that at home. We've got our 10-pack variety set of folk art brushes. We have a water basin, paper towels, our palette paper, and then the paints we're going to be using tonight are our folk art acrylic paints. We've got classic green, lime green, navy blue, aqua, daffodil yellow, baby pink, and wicker white. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start transferring our pattern. So what you're going to want to do, I'm going to move my template aside. You're going to lay your transfer paper down. So on this one, we have kind of a cloudy side, and that's the side that we want up. You can tell this part is the part that's going to come up onto our palette. So we want that facing down. I'm going to tape it down using just a little piece of tape, just so it doesn't move anywhere when I'm trying to transfer. And then I'm going to tape my template right on top of that. And again, it's just like a little puzzle. They should just line right up next to each other. And you may need to, if you don't have big enough transfer paper, just shift it after you've traced some of it. So I can show you how to do that as well. Okay. I'm just going to tack this down. We just want it so it doesn't move while we're trying to transfer it. Make sure it's nice, and I'm going to make sure these lines are lined up here. right, so now we can start transferring. A lot of times when I'm transferring patterns like this, I like to use a red pen, a red ballpoint pen, and I go over the lines, and that way I can see really well what I have traced over already. But tonight we're just gonna go ahead and use the end of our paintbrush. So you can just use the back side here, and we're gonna use it like a pen, and we're going to follow the lines of our template using about a medium pressure. You don't have to press it down super hard, just enough to make sure that you are transferring those lines. And you can kind of pick up the corner and see if you're pressing down hard enough. See, I can see it plenty there, so that's a good pressure. So that's how we're going to transfer our lines. And we're just going to go over this whole pattern. Make sure we get all of the lines included. And this doesn't need to be perfect, because of course we're going to paint right over this, and the Folk Art acrylic paints will cover our transfer lines easily. So if you mess up, or if you, one of your lines is crooked or something like that, do not even worry about it at all. We're going to cover it all up. We just want to get the general idea of the shape of these leaves. Because like I said, this is a little bit maybe trickier of a composition, so we wanted to help you guys out. And so like I said before, if you don't have transfer paper, you can turn your template over and just rub the back with a graphite pencil, and that will make your template work just like transfer paper. So when you are doing this step, the graphite is being pressed onto your wood surface or your canvas or whatever you're going to paint on. So it's kind of like a little hack if you don't have transfer paper at home.
So Jessie, while you're tracing, I'm just going to say hi to everybody that's watching and either watching along now or painting with us live. Again, if you aren't painting with us live, you can watch this on your own time and with your friends. You can watch it on demand on our YouTube channel tomorrow, and also you can watch it right here on Facebook after we go live. You can rewind and pause as you watch it, so you can take your time and do it. So hi Robin, hi Kim, hi Paula, Cindy, Carl, Paula, Annie, Connie, Kelly, there's tons of people watching. So make sure also when you do your painting that you hashtag your painting after so we can see it. So hashtag let's paint, hashtag Plaid Crafts. And someone mentioned that they love the floral painting, the roses behind us.
Oh yeah.
So I wanted to tell everybody, we do a color of the month. It's Folk Art Color of the Month, and we pick a beautiful palette that is seasonal to trends that we're seeing, and we do an entire set of projects. So whether it's a painting, or you can see some of the painted vases, and that'll actually be on Plaid Online. And if you're not already signed up to get our newsletter, you want to go to plaidonline.com and sign up, because this weekend there'll actually be an email coming out and a blog post that will be talking about Folk Art Color of the Month. So you can get all the tips and instructions and step outs and the color palette on how to create these projects. So I love that it matches up with our spring palms, and it's getting everybody in that, kind of springy feeling. March,
get ready for spring break.
Yeah, right. So you want to make sure that you sign up for our newsletter if you haven't already.
Yeah.
So I think you're just about done tracing.
Yeah, I've traced up until where I have my transfer paper. I mentioned when we first started that I'm going to have to shift it over so I can just so I can keep my template in the same place. That's why we only just put a little bit of tape so we can keep it where we need it to be. So I'm going to sort of move these, because these are all transferred, and I'm going to shift my transfer paper. And one of the great things about transfer paper is I can use this sheet over and over and over and over again on multiple different paintings before it kind of loses its charcoal that's on the back. So you can see the lines are kind of in it, but we can use this many more times before it stops working. I'm just going to kind of finagle my paper right under here. It doesn't matter if it lines up because it's all transferred anyway, but we're just going to follow our template. And I'm going to put this back down, and I'm just going to finish. It's okay if it overlaps. I'm not exactly sure where I have the transfer paper ending, but that's okay, because if you repeat it, it is not a big deal. I'd rather repeat it than miss any lines. And if you were to pull it up and realize like maybe there was an area that you missed, you didn't realize you hadn't transferred over, if you keep your template on like this, then you can just slide your transfer paper back over and go back over that line without having to worry about lining anything up. That's just another little trick. Just to make sure I have all these lines. Again, does not have to be perfect, just so we can get that basic shape down on there. All right, so I should have all of my pattern transferred. You can see it pretty well because I have a black transfer paper here. Yeah, it comes in lots of different colors too, so if you were to like base coat your canvas first or something, if you want like a dark background, there's lighter transfer papers you can buy. We are just using black tonight. So I'm gonna move my pattern over. Is everybody doing okay? Everybody got their... Okay, cool. So we're gonna start painting. So we're gonna start painting the background. So I'm gonna grab some baby pink. This is our Folk Art acrylic paint. And I'm going to put about a quarter size amount on my palette. I can always put more. So I've got my 3/4 inch flat brush here. And I'm just gonna start painting around. So I'm gonna try to paint right around the leaves that we have transferred. So I'm going to start with the bigger areas with this large 3/4 inch flat. Oops. And if you feel like if your paint is dragging a little bit, that's because we're using this wood palette. So since it's not primed, we didn't prime this, it absorbs the paint much faster, and so that your paint will dry much more quickly on this wood palette, which I like. But if you feel like your brush is dragging, you can just dip it in a little bit of water, and that'll help the paint flow. It'll keep it wet a little bit longer for your base coating. So I'm just going to do all of the bigger areas here. Put a little bit more paint onto my palette. I don't want my brush to be too wet, so I'm going to dry it off since I had it in water. And again, I'm just doing the larger areas here, and then I'll get into some of those details with a smaller brush to make it easier. This is just for big coverage. And you can feel free to paint the sides of your canvas now if you want to. I usually just do that at the end, just so I don't have to tilt my canvas up and get kind of messy while I'm trying to paint. But you can feel free to paint the sides now if you want to. Just going into the bigger areas with my baby pink. For this painting, you definitely could pick a different background color if you wanted to. I was kind of going for like a Havana sort of vibe, sort of tropical with the baby pink, so that's why we picked pink for tonight. All right, and so I'm going to grab one of my smaller brushes to start going into the details between these leaves. It almost feels like a little bit of a paint by number right now. It's kind of like a coloring book. We're just filling in those lines, and then the fun part will be painting the details and all of the shading and highlights and whatnot on top of the leaves. So I'm going to clean my brush off. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll pick up my number 10 flat brush. And I didn't mention this before we started using the larger flat. If you have brand new brushes at home, you might want to dunk them in water just to wash off some of that sizing if they're brand new out of the package, just to make them a little bit softer. All right, so I'm going to pick up my pink, and I'm just going to use the edge of my brush to get right up to the edge of these lines, just so we can have a nice, even background. And if you go over the lines a little bit, that's totally fine, because we're going to paint those green, and the green will easily cover up any pink that you might get into your leaf by accident. But we're just going to use the edge to follow around those lines and make the background all pink. You can see what great coverage the Folk Art acrylic paint has. This is just one coat of pink, and I mean, it's pretty much full coverage. We won't even need to do a second coat for this background, which is pretty cool. and it goes on these wood canvases really nicely. So we're just painting into these little areas. And like I said, don't worry about this being perfect. See, I went over the line a little bit. I'm not bothered by that because we're going to go back over it and cover all of that in green anyway. So we can just clean up those lines then. We just want to make sure the background is all pink. We don't want to miss any areas around it. And if you feel like for some of these details you need an even smaller brush, you can feel free to use one of the smaller brushes from the pack. If you feel like it's easier for you to get into some of the details with that. But like I said, it's just kind of like a coloring book right now. We're just coloring the background, trying to stay in the lines as best we can. How's everybody's backgrounds coming? Doing good. We've got a full house here tonight for our Let's Paint Live. We have lots of painters and they're painting very quietly. They're very concentrated. And if you miss some, don't even worry about it. Once you start going and painting the green parts of the leaf, if you're like, oh shoot, this whole area is supposed to be pink, you can always go back and fill it in, so don't worry at all. Might be a little difficult to see which areas are background and which areas are foreground at this point because it's just a line drawing, so if you miss some, that's okay. There'll be time to fill it in. Oops. Don't forget, we're just trying to roughly block that color in so the background is pink. We're even going to go back in towards the end of this painting, and we're going to add some texture to the background just to make it a little more interesting, so it's just not a flat pink. So right now we're just really trying to block that color in. So you can see this line is not really an open space, it's just a single line. So I'm just going to try to kind of get right up to that little stem, and then later on we'll just paint that as a green line with our paintbrush. So if you lose the stem a little bit, that's okay. We'll be able to tell where it is based on where the leaves are. In case you're wondering how to treat that, you can just sort of go right up to it, as close as you can get. You can see I didn't really have my transfer paper close enough to the edge, so I'm just going to kind of see where those lines were headed and fill them in around it. I can kind of see where the shape of the leaf was going to go. So use my imagination a little.
Jesse, while you're finishing filling in the baby pink around the leaves, and I love the Havana tropical reference you made. Like I said, I think everybody's needing that.
Yep.
Don't forget that if you comment while our paint night is live on Facebook, you'll be entered to win the entire Let's Paint Live kit, which is 24 colors and your brushes that you'll need to complete the rest of the 12 months of Let's Paint Live paintings that we are doing. So it's really exciting. So don't forget to comment. And if you have questions, we want to hear where you're from, what you're painting, what you're working on. We also love to hear subject matter that you guys would love to paint and see. So let us know if you have any ideas. Because when we're planning this out, we definitely want to hear what you guys want to paint. We love seeing what you're creating, what's inspiring you. So we love to be able to share that with you. And a great place to do that is our Let's Paint Facebook group. So again, along with joining and signing up for our newsletter, you can join our Facebook group, our Let's Paint Facebook group, where Andy and Donna and Jesse and the entire paint team is always being interactive and commenting and sharing with everybody. It's a great resource. It's a great community. People sharing their projects and supporting each other. It's a great group of artists, so you'll want to join that. So just wanted to remind everybody that while you're filling in your background, and it is really quiet, we have 13 or 15 people, and I've never heard the crowd so quiet. So it's very relaxing. It is like
they're either really relaxed or it's hard. I don't know. It goes either way when it's quiet. Hopefully they're relaxed.
So I think you're just about done. You can move on.
All right, so we have finished our background with baby pink. I'm going to go ahead and wash my brush off, and I'm going to grab some of my classic green folk art acrylic paint. And I'm going to do about a quarter size amount on my palette. That's not really a quarter, let's do a little more. And I'm going to grab I got some pink on there, my 12 flat. And again, this is a brand new brush, so I'm going to go ahead and wash that sizing off and dry it off. And I'm going to, can you guys see my palette? Let me move it over a little. I am going to load my brush up. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to paint the inside of this large leaf here. We're going to ignore the stem for now. So sort of the same thing we just did with the background. We're still kind of filling it in, getting all of those base colors down, those bright, beautiful pinks and greens, so that we can go back and add lots of dimension and highlights and shadows on top to make our leaves look really real. So again, I'm using sort of the chiseled edge of my brush to go right up to these corners. If you feel more comfortable using a smaller brush to go right up to the corners, you can feel free to do that. We want to be a little bit more careful this time because we're covering up the baby pink. We want sort of a crisp edge, but don't forget, if you do mess up, if you go over the line, it is always fixable, so don't stress about it for sure. We just want to try to get as clean of a line as we can around our leaf. And again, if you feel more comfortable using a smaller brush in some of these details, feel free to use maybe your 6 flat or even your 10 flat that we were just using, if that feels more comfortable for you for these smaller detailed parts. It takes a little bit of practice to use sort of a larger flat brush, sort of using the chiseled edge to paint into these tiny details. It does take a little bit of practice, so.
Somebody had a question of what color you're using.
Yeah, right now I'm using classic green. These are our folk art acrylic paints. I really love this green. It's sort of like a grass, shamrocky sort of color. It's a great, just sort of like classic green, like the name. They named it well. So I'm just going to paint right up until that edge.
And Charlotte is asking, I'm just going to ask a couple questions here. Charlotte
Yeah.
is asking, still not adding water.
No, we're not adding water. I don't usually add water when I'm painting just because it thins the paint, and I want to make sure I get that full thickness of the paint, and that's how I get the best coverage when I'm painting. So like I said earlier, if you were dragging a little bit, if your paint was drying too quickly, you could add a little bit of water to your brush, but I don't usually add much water to my acrylic paint at all.
That's what's so great about folk art, that it is rich and creamy and you can use it right out of the bottle.
Exactly. It's got full coverage, but if you do add water, it'll thin it down. You won't get as great of coverage as you would just straight out of the bottle.
And again, you can paint on a canvas or illustration board or
Absolutely.
canvas board. We typically paint on our 12 by 12 12 wood canvases.
Yeah.
So they're really great. They're sturdy. They're great. You can frame them, or you can hang them right on the wall. So it's kind of almost a finished
you can see
piece.
the back. We've got sort of you can just hang it right on a nail there. You can even use this size and or side to make it like a framed painting on that side. We do that a lot here too. So these are one of my favorite surfaces for sure.
Yep, so you can click the link below also, and it'll take you right to plaidonline.com, where you can purchase the surface along with your Let's Paint kit.
Yeah, like Kira said, we use these for most of our paint nights just because they're so fun to paint on. They take the paint so well, so you can stock up on them. And we're still just filling in this large leaf. I know it takes a little while when you've got something so detailed to sort of fill it in and all of those little edges and crevices and nooks and crannies, so just take your time. Just using my chisel edge to go right up to the corners there.
Oh, Jesse, you might have a challenge.
Uh-oh.
3 people so far want to do sea turtle.
Sea turtle is my favorite animal.
Oh,
so we might have to try that.
Sea turtle. So we have 3 votes for that. So again, let us know what everybody out there would like to see us paint, and you'd like to paint along with us. So sea turtle is trending tonight. I love that.
My sister's in the audience tonight, and when you just said that, she gasped. So I think she's excited too.
That's awesome. So thanks Rebecca and Kelly and Annie. Thanks for the suggestion,
joining
Robin.
us.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Hey, Robin.
Hi, Sherry.
Sounds like a lot of familiar names from our Let's Paint group too.
Right.
Yeah. All right, so we're still just filling this in. I'm using my number 12 flat brush. This is from our Folk Art 10-piece variety set. And we are using Folk Art acrylic paints, and this color is Classic Green. And we're just sort of taking our time filling in this big leaf here. Sort of relaxing to just fill in those areas. Sort of mindless, this part. And like I said before, in case anybody's just joining us, if you feel more comfortable using a smaller flat brush from the pack, feel free to do that. It might be easier to get into some of these little details. I'm just using sort of the chiseled edge of my brush to get into those finer details, but that does take a little bit of practice. So if you're new to painting and you don't feel like you're as practiced with using a brush, feel free to use a smaller brush for this part to get, like I said, to get into these smaller areas. Just going to smooth out my paint there. And this side will be easier because I don't have as much, I don't have these little holes to paint around, so it'll be a little quicker. And we're still using Classic Green in our Folk Art acrylic paints. And our number 12 flat brush. I keep forgetting which number this is. You can see I accidentally covered up my liner with a little bit of pink, and I don't want my leaf to be so thin, so I'm going to go over the pink where that line was originally. You can see how well the pink is dry now, so you can see how well the green covers it up because it has such great coverage, so it's easy to fix little mistakes like that. So I'm just getting ready to finish up this big leaf, this larger leaf that's in our composition. And I'm also going to paint this guy right here, this sort of medium leaf down on the bottom left. We're going to go ahead and fill him in real quick too. He'll be much quicker because he's a solid shape. So just go ahead and fill that guy in with Classic Green.
Jesse, you could do a fun St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, that'd be super fun.
Painting with this green, like you
Yeah.
said, using shamrock, and just these green leaves, you know, it's
Yeah,
March.
they
I
do
love that
remind me of
idea.
shamrocks a little bit.
So you could do the same thing. You could, you know, print a pattern and trace your pattern right on your canvas and
Totally.
use the same color palette and do something fun for the holiday.
Yeah, you can probably use a similar technique too. Once we teach you sort of how to shadow and highlight these leaves, you can probably just apply those same techniques to a shamrock. That'd be really fun. We're over here trying to skip St. Patrick's Day and go straight to spring break.
I think everybody could use some spring break weather and sunshine right now.
Agreed. It has been raining in Atlanta for weeks, it feels like. Okay. All right, so you can see I've got my larger leaf painted, and then I've got my little leaf here painted. I'm going to go ahead and clean my brush off. If you're still painting, don't worry. Take your time. So I'm going to grab my my number 1 liner brush. I'm going to wash some of that sizing off and dry it. And I'm going to put just a tiny bit right now of navy blue Folk Art acrylic paint onto my palette, just a tiny bit. Because we're about to paint these 2 leaves the same color green. We're going to use classic green for the base of both of those leaves. And I don't want to lose these shapes in here that distinguish the leaves apart because we might forget where they were. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to use this liner brush, take some blue, and we're just going to outline this leaf here and sort of paint in those lines so we can see where the leaves are separated. So here, I'll show you what I mean. Just really quick, it doesn't need to be perfect. I just want to be able to see what that line is when I go and I paint the other one green. When I paint these green, we might lose all of these shapes. So just to help distinguish it right now, we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit for this part, but I just really don't want anybody to lose those lines. So I'm going to paint this here too. So that's all I'm going to do. I just want to make sure that I can see where those where those leaves are separate. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab my number 10 flat brush, and I'm going to paint these 2 areas with classic green as well. And then I promise that's the last time we're base coating anything with classic green.
So Robin says you're pretty fast.
Sorry, Robin.
We do a lot of practice
We
here. So how many times have you painted this?
Quite a few. This is my 3rd.
And then Bobby said you don't even get it on your long sleeves.
I try, Bobby. Thank you. I try to be a tidy painter. I appreciate you noticing.
You're professional. Even if you do, you have to keep going.
Yes. You don't really just paint all over my lap. No, I'm just kidding.
So Kelly has a question. Why do you use the blue to do that? Is there a reason?
Well, Kelly, since I've kind of painted this painting before and I have it planned out, you can see here in our final painting that we already have some dark blue shadows there, and that's why I use that blue, because we're able to cover it up. So even if we were to use a different color, we could cover it up easily, but that's just sort of saving us a step because it's going to be blue anyway. So that's why I said we kind of jumped to the end a little bit and added that right now so that we can use that as a tool to distinguish the leaves.
So you're using your blue as your shadow. You could use a dark green or a
Totally,
brown. You
yeah.
just chose, as your color palette to use the blue.
Right, and we're going to use several colors. We're going to use different shades of green and different shades of blue to sort of highlight and shade. So that's just going to be our darkest for this painting, the navy blue.
And I love that color palette. Again, talking
you.
about folk art color of the month. This palette was definitely inspired by that.
Yeah.
So I love these bright colors, the contrast of the pink and the green. So
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really fun one. I can always tell when people love a painting when we have a full house in the audience. Everybody wants to paint it, so that's exciting.
it's a good one.
Yeah.
Oh, so Kelly said, okay, it's a shadow. So yeah, great
Yeah, it
question
will be
though.
a
I
shadow,
love
yeah.
that you guys are asking questions, and that's why we're here.
Yep. Yeah, it'll be a shadow later on, but for now, just to distinguish those lines. That is a good question though. All right, so I'm just painting in these. Try to slow it down a little bit for Robin, and I'm sure if Robin's having trouble keeping up, there's probably lots of people here too. All right. I know, it's all these little details that take a little while.
But the great thing is, if you want to go back and watch it on demand on Facebook after you're live, you can
Right.
rewind, you can pause,
Right.
and also it'll be available on our YouTube channel along with all our other Let's Paint Live
Yeah.
and Let's Paint content. So,
Yep, you can go back and watch anything that we've done.
right, so this one, and again, all our past months of our Let's Paint Live and our entire Let's Paint program will be on plaidonline.com/Let's Paint, and check out our YouTube channel. And I love that feature that, again, if you can't paint live, you can take time for yourself, you can get cozy in your house, you can get your friends, your family, and you can just go to town and paint and relax and have some me time.
Yep.
So it's a great, I think this one is super relaxing. There's something about just filling that in that
I know.
process.
All right. So let's give everybody a minute to catch up. Maybe we can check out the audience or something. I don't want to get too far ahead. I want to let people to be able to keep up with me. So I'm going to pause for a minute or two.
Yeah, so I think Will is going to show what everybody is doing in our studio here tonight.
Those look great, guys.
Again, everyone's so quiet.
I know. That means I'm going too fast. I'll take that as a hint. All right. Should we get back to it?
Yeah, I think everybody's getting filled in, it looks like, at least
Okay.
here in the studio.
Awesome.
Kelly's going to paint this tomorrow, she said, after her coffee. That sounds like an amazing
that'll be
Friday
fun.
morning.
It does sound great. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to finish painting just these couple of stems here. We're sticking with the classic green. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my number 6 flat. This is, I believe, the smallest of the flats in this pack. Oh, second to smallest. So I'm going to use this. I'm going to wash out the sizing again because we haven't used this brush yet. I'm going to grab some paint and I'm just going to paint the stem. And again, guys, it doesn't need to be perfect. It's good to be careful, but it does not need to be perfect. So. And you can see I actually lost some of my, you can see they're supposed to connect and I painted right over that in the middle. So I'm just going to sort of try to see where those lines would have been and I'll kind of make that line in. Kind of use my hand to figure out where that would have connected because I accidentally painted over those lines that I transferred with pink when we were painting the background. So, okay. All right, so hopefully you guys are sort of catching up a little bit. We are going to go ahead and we're going to grab some of our lime green. This is the lighter of our greens in our palette tonight. And we're going to put about a nickel-sized amount of that onto our palette. And I'm going to grab my, oops, I left this in the water. I'm going to grab my number 10 flat brush. I don't want it to be too wet, so I'm going to make sure it's fairly dry. And we are going to paint pretty much the parts that, aside from the stem, we're pretty much going to paint the parts that are still raw canvas right now. So we've got the tops of these leaves, and we've got this sort of little sprig of leaves over here on the right. So we're going to do those using our lime green. This is a really fun, bright pop of color for this painting. I guess they're kind of all pops of color. They're all pretty bright, but this one's extra bright. And again, I'm just using the chiseled tip of my brush get into those smaller areas, but feel free to use maybe your number 6 flat if you're feeling like a little more comfortable with that for the smaller detailed parts. We're we're just filling in those parts. You can see how it's starting to give it some dimension. You can see how that leaf is going to be folded over when we're done. It's already looking like a real three-dimensional leaf. Everybody's still concentrating really hard. And again, I'm using lime green and my number 10 flat brush to paint sort of the remaining wood areas, but we're going to leave that stem for now. That one's going to be darker. Okay. So we're going to do a little bit of mixing for a second. I'm going to add some more of my Folk Art Acrylic Classic Green to my palette. That's the main green we've been using, sort of the medium green color. And I still have a little bit of navy blue in my palette. If you don't have any more navy, feel free to go ahead and now and add some more. And we're just going to do one part of each of these for a beautiful dark blue color. So 1 part navy blue, 1 part classic green. Maybe that wasn't really 1 part. 1 part classic green. And we're just going to mix those, sort of going back and forth with the tip of our brush. I'm using my number 10 flat. And you can see we're going to get a really beautiful, deep, cool green color. It's almost going to be sort of teal looking. It's really pretty. And we're going to use this color that we just made for the stem of our larger leaf. So I've got my number 10 flat. I'm going to use my chiseled edge again. And if you have round brushes at home, you can feel free to use those. We're using the variety pack, so I usually use the flat brushes for things like this because I like to use that chiseled edge. But if you feel more comfortable and you have a round brush, you can do that too. So I'm using my chiseled edge to fill in this stem of our big palm leaf here. You can see this is like a really beautiful sort of like dark teal color. I really love the way these two colors look mixed together. So that's going to be our stem. I'm going to mix a little bit more of this because we're going to keep using it for a second. And again, we're just doing 1 part classic green and 1 part navy blue to make this dark teal color. Make sure it's nice and mixed. And I don't want when you mix paint with your brush, you usually end up sort of oversaturating your brush with paint, and I don't like to have my brush this filled with paint because it's harder to control my lines. So after I'm done mixing, I usually will wipe it onto a paper towel just to remove the bulk of that paint and then sort of reload it just so I have the tip. It's easier to control your paint that way. So we are going to use this brush and we're going to start painting sort of the edges, some of the shadow areas. We talked about these are going to be shadows earlier. So we're going to paint some of those areas now. I'll show you on the final painting what it's going to look like. So some of these dark edges that are on this painting, we're going to be painting those with this teal color. So if you guys are familiar with brushwork, if you've watched a lot of Andy's Lunch and Learns and skill builders and things like that, You might know some of these tricks, but I'll show them to you now in case you're not. So in order to get thick and thin lines with one brush, it depends on how much pressure you apply to your brush. So I'm going to practice on my palette a little bit here. So if I drag my brush along and I put only a very little bit of pressure, I get a nice thin line. And then as soon as I start adding more pressure, my line gets much thicker. You see that? And it's all using the exact same brush. I'm still holding it upright. Here, I'll show you. So I'm applying very little pressure and I'm getting a nice thin line. And then I'm going to add more pressure and I get that thicker line. Do you see that? So if you want to practice, keep practicing that on a piece of paper or on your palette paper. That's sort of the technique we're going to be using to paint the edges of these leaves. So I'll show you. Here, I'll show you the first one in case you're a little bit confused about what I mean. So I'm going to paint sort of a shadow here. I'm going to start here and end there. So I'm going to hold my brush right on the edge and I'm going to hold it upright, not much pressure, and then I'm going to apply more pressure. You see how I did that there? And then I'm going to come back this way and add more pressure. And so it makes sort of a cool low light, sort of a shadow right there on the bottom of that piece of leaf. And we'll do the same thing down here. So we'll start there and end there. So very little pressure and then more pressure and then pull up the pressure a little bit. I hope that makes sense to you guys. Do the same thing down here. A little bit of pressure, a lot of pressure. And we're sort of applying, you can see by what I've done here, we're sort of applying the most pressure to that curve. So right when it has that curve of the leaf is where we're sort of pressing down and adding the extra pressure. So I'm just applying a little bit of pressure and then pressing down and pulling up again. You can see we're getting these cool shadows in the bottom of the leaf. And of course we're doing it towards the bottom because that's where your shadow would be if the light were coming down from above. So I'm going to do some up here too, just applying a light pressure and then pushing down. Hopefully you're kind of getting the hang of it. If not, feel free to do some more lines on your palette paper. Doing light pressure. I'm going to do some shadows in these sort of scooped out areas too. So light pressure. And go down and apply some more pressure. Light pressure, go down, right around the curve again. We're applying the pressure right at like the peak of the curve. And then I'm going to add some, so I'm imagining this leaf is sort of covering up this leaf a little bit as it bends over, it's sort of covering our big leaf. So I'm going to do a shadow there too. So light pressure, press down and pull up. Didn't have enough paint on there, so we'll go back the other way. And I'm running out a little bit, so I'm going to put some more, I'm going to mix some more of this color. Don't forget it's 1 part classic green, 1 part navy blue. And I only mix a little bit at a time because I can always mix more. So we're going to follow these blue lines that we made earlier that someone asked what they were going to be. Now you can see they're going to be shadows. So we're going to do the same thing that we're doing right now. We're going to follow those lines and do it, these navy lines that we made earlier. Light pressure, heavier pressure. There's a little bit of a twist there, so it's a little bit different, but it's still the same basic technique. Light, heavy, light. So I'm going to go under this here and make a shadow. Light pressure, heavy pressure. You see how it makes sort of cool lines and cool shapes in just one brush stroke. Just using the brush's shape to your advantage. So light pressure, heavy pressure, and then light pressure again. Do another shadow here, light pressure, heavy pressure. If you feel like you want more shadows or less shadows, feel free to do whatever you think looks best for your painting. So light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure. Do another one here, light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure. And I'm even going to do it for these little holes right here in the leaf. I'm going to do it on the top because that's where the shadow would be. So light pressure, heavy pressure, light, just sort of right around there, little tiny ones. Light, heavy, light. You can see we've made some really cool shadows on our leaf now. It's got a little bit more dimension than it did with just that base coat of classic green. So I'm going to wash off my brush. Actually, no, I'm sorry. We're going to keep this brush. I shouldn't have washed it off. we're gonna hang on to our 10 flat. Since we've got this color mixed here, we'll just go ahead and do this part. We're gonna add some dimension to this guy over here. So I'll show you, we just sort of have, he's a little bit simpler. We just sort of painted some veins in him, and we did make a shadow at the bottom. So I'm gonna show you how I sort of got those shapes there. So we're gonna use a really similar technique. We're still gonna use the chiseled, see, like I even like to pinch it sometimes, the chiseled edge of our brush. This is our number 10 flat. I'm gonna pick up this teal color that we've mixed, and I'm gonna start sort of where the stem ends, and I'm just gonna draw that vein. And I'm using light pressure. Now that you guys are all experts in how much pressure to apply to your brush, I'm gonna mix some more because my brush is a little dry. So we're going to do light pressure and then heavy pressure and light pressure, sort of going out from that center line. And that's how we're gonna make these veins on this leaf. Light, heavy, light. So light, heavy, light. And that's just making the veins for this leaf, giving him a little bit more detail and dimension. And I'm also going to do another shadow here. So we're gonna do light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure. I'm also going to put, so I like to sort of put, when I'm doing something like this and the whole painting is sort of based on like the dimensions of something, I like to make sure that I have shadows everywhere there would be shadow. So this guy, these stems are looking kind of flat, so I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm going to create shadows in the bottom of them. Just even though, I'm just gonna run my brush along the underside of these stems to make them look a little more dimensional. I don't want them to be so cartoon looking. So now I'm going to wash my brush off. And I'm going to pick up my number 12 flat, and I'm going to load my number 12 flat with some of my lime green. If you don't have any left on your palette, feel free to grab some more. And I'm going to just loosely mix it with my classic green. I'm not going to put a ton of classic green in there, and I'm not even going to mix it all the way, which may seem weird, but I'll show you why I'm doing that in a second. See how it's not really, yeah, you can see. It's not really mixed all the way. You can still see both colors in there. We are going to paint these parts of the leaf, sort of where it's just like a little brighter in some areas. So I'll show you how we do that. It's going to be sort of a similar technique to what we just did with our smaller flat brush, but instead of going upright and sideways, we're going to go this way, but we're still going to apply loose pressure and then heavy pressure and then loose pressure again. So we're going to, similar to how we just did these veins on the bigger leaf, we're going to make shapes going out like that on the little pieces of the leaf. So here, I'll show you. I'll start here. I'm going to start at the stem of my leaf. Loose pressure, heavy pressure, loose pressure. You see that line there? And you can see both the classic green and the lime green in there. So you get sort of both colors. You get a little bit more dimension without having to do all the work because you have both colors in your brush. So I'm going to do the same thing going up here. I'm going to start at my stem. Loose pressure, heavy pressure, loose pressure. And I'm just following the lines of these areas of leaf that sort of branch out from that stem. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Loose pressure, heavy pressure, loose pressure. And again, I'm just following the lines of the leaf. Loose pressure, heavy pressure, loose pressure. You kind of see what I'm doing here? So I'm going to do the same thing up here. Loose, heavy, loose. And I'm just following each shape. Loose, heavy, loose. And I'll even do one down here. I'm going to go up here and do it too. So you have some nice dimension there. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to blend in some more green while it's wet. So I'm going to wipe off my brush a little. See, this is sort of like a stark line. I can grab some green and sort of do the same exact shape right next to it. Sort of just blend that in. You see how that blends that nicely into the green beneath it? Wherever you feel like maybe there's too harsh of a line, do the same thing using the classic green, and that will blend it into the classic green beneath it. Okay, so I'm going to use this same sort of classic green and lime green mixture. We've got sort of a medium green. And I'm going to use these for some more highlights on my other leaves. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to put some highlights following these lines. We're sort of just following the natural shape of the leaves. So I'm going to do one of those lines here. So loose, heavy, loose. Just giving it some more dimension because, you know, there'd be lots of, like, it's sort of like a face. So everything comes out from the center and it's more even when you follow the line. Same with leaves. Everything comes from the center. So all of your brush strokes should be coming from the center as well. So loose, heavy, loose. We're just following the lines that we've already been painting. I'm going to do some in between here too. Loose pressure, heavy pressure, loose. Just adding more dimension. The more colors and the more layers you add, oftentimes the more dimension you get. I'm going to go and add a highlight around here. Loose, heavy, loose. All right, I'm going to add some highlights to these stems too while I have this color on my brush. It's a little bit lighter than just the classic green. And I'm also going to use this medium green that we've mixed, and I'm going to paint the stem of this guy here, this little sprig of leaves, and I'm going to paint the shadows underneath these leaves because they're a little bit lighter, so we don't want to make them too dark. But here, I'll paint the stem just using the chiseled edge of my brush, just how we've been doing. And then I'll just use the same exact technique. Loose, heavy, loose underneath each of those leaves. Loose, heavy, loose. Once you master sort of how to handle your brush in that way, it's really easy to paint things dimensionally. Loose, heavy, loose. The same thing. You can see now he's got some nice shadows on there. How's everybody's looking? Good?
It's good. Well, do you want to show everybody what we've got here in the studio as people catch up? Mm-hmm. And it was really beautiful when he was showing up close on the painting just the depth that you're giving it by creating the shadows and the highlights and all the different shades of green with just using 2 different greens. Mm-hmm. It's amazing what you create. And somebody commented they love the mixing of the colors, and folk art has hundreds of colors.
Hundreds. It's almost like you don't really need to mix them.
But it's really fun to do.
Exactly, because there's a color for everything. But yeah, it is really easy to do. They mix really beautifully. They don't get muddy. They stay really bright. So that's why I love these paints so much.
I think everybody's catching up.
Okay, cool. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my number 10 flat brush, and I'm going to put some more navy blue folk art acrylic paint on my palette. And we're going to do the same thing we were doing that we just did. We're going to add even more dimension. So basically wherever these dark teal lines are, we're going to go even further out on the edge with just straight up navy blue, just plain navy blue. So doing the same thing. So you can see here, I'll start here, maybe you can see better. So we'll go light, heavy, light. And that's just adding another layer of color. We're doing the same thing, we're just going back over, getting lots of practice with this technique. We're just layering it and adding lots of different colors to this painting. Lots of different greens to make it really pop. Go right on the edge of where I have those teal colors, just deepening it even more. Go up here. I'm using the number 10 flat brush, and we're using just straight up navy blue. And again, I'm just following where I already have all of my dark teal lines. I'm just doing it with the navy blue to give it a little bit more shadow. Do a little there. And I can even add a little bit of shadow to this stem here. I'm just gonna add a little bit, not a ton, just lightly, to give that sort of vein that's running through the middle a little bit of dimension too. And then I can add a little bit of dark blue in here, just sort of wherever you think it needs it. Yeah, it's really starting to pop now. I'm gonna wash my brush off, and I'm going to pick up the Aqua. This is Aqua. This is one of my favorite folk art acrylic colors. I'm gonna apply just a little bit to my palette, maybe like a dime-sized amount. And I'm going to use the same brush that I had before, the number 10 flat, and I'm going to add even a further layer of color to these areas that we've already been painting. So I'm going to, but this time, so we did the teal color, and then we did the blue below it. Now on the other side of the teal, we're gonna do the aqua. So hopefully that makes sense. Here, I'll show you though, in case it doesn't. So I've got my blue, my teal, and then on the top side of that, I'm doing the same thing, light, heavy, light with the aqua, just to give it like another pop of color, another layer of color. And I'm not gonna do this on all of them, I don't think. I'm just gonna do it on some. So light, heavy, light, and I'm not putting quite as much maybe as the teal, but I just want to have that pop of blue. I think it looks really pretty on the leaf. It's sort of unexpected, which I think is fun. I said I wasn't going to do it with all of them, but I think I might actually. I think I changed my mind. Again, we're just going on the other side of this dark teal color, just where we did the blue. Just where we did the navy blue, I should say. Okay. And I can use this teal to highlight my stem too. There we go. And then I clean off my brush. I'm going to add some daffodil yellow to my palette, and this is going to be the lightest highlight on our leaves. So kind of makes sense. Of course, you use blue and yellow to make green. So most of our painting is green, and we use blue as our darkest color and yellow as our lightest color. So that's kind of why they all flow so well together, because they're in the same color family. So I'm going to grab some yellow. And I'm still using my number 10 flat brush. I really like this, like a little flat brush. I'm gonna load up my brush with daffodil yellow, and I'm just gonna do some really light highlights. I don't want a ton on here. I'm gonna definitely highlight these really light lime green areas, so we can do that first. Sort of just at the top is where your highlights will normally go, because the sun is coming from the top, of course, shining down. And on top of there, and this is just adding like a nice pop of highlight. I'm going to highlight these guys. Just really quick. You want it to be a nice loose brush stroke. And then some areas I want it to be pretty light here, so I'm going to add a highlight there. And I'll add one there. I'm just using the chisel edge of my brush. I'm not making these lines too big right now. I'm going on some of these higher areas. I'm going to add a little bit of highlight to my stem. And add a little more here, I think. And I'll even add a little bit here just to give it a little more color. Brighten up some of these dark areas. You can even do one here, another little highlight. Okay. So that's it for our leaves. So if you feel like there's anything you missed on the leaves, you can feel free to go back and sort of play with it a little bit now, or paint some areas you missed, or if you wanted to add some more highlights or lowlights, you can feel free. And we're going to add some white to the background. Just a little bit, it's just so we don't want the background to be so flat. It'll look a little better if there's a little bit of a gradient there. So I've got my 3/4 inch flat brush. I'm going to load that up, and I'm going to paint some white just really loosely in the top right corner is where we're gonna concentrate the white. Just, you can see I'm like being super loose, just paint the top right corner, and then I'm gonna add pink on top of it, and I'm gonna mix them together on the canvas. So adding white, so it'll be really subtle, but it'll look sort of like a gradient, like it's lighter pink at the top and then it gets darker at the bottom. This is a really easy way to do it. Oops. You can see my brush just dragged a little, so I might put a little bit of water in there. I'm gonna smooth it out. You can have yours really smooth, or you can make it textured if you want. It's up to you. But see, I don't like that harsh of a line, so that's why I'm gonna add the pink and blend it in. Just big brush strokes for smooth, and then you can do smaller brush strokes if you want it to look a little bit textured like that. If you want it to be sort of smooth and even, then the longer brush strokes are the way to go. It is a little tricky around the leaves, but it's definitely doable. So if you feel like you're having trouble making them super smooth, go ahead and do some like choppy textured brush strokes as well. That's really pretty too. It's totally your preference. Blend it in with some pink. You can see I'm being super loose. I like sort of a loose background on my paintings. Blend it down. Okay. All right, so you can add as much white. You can see it's kind of looks like it's like a gradient, like an ombre effect in the background. You've got like sort of a darker pink and then a lighter pink at the top. It looks behind it. It's kind of like a little trick to make a more interesting background when you've already painted the foreground. So that's it. So make sure that you sign your painting when you're done. Yeah, that's Spring Palms.
So thanks everybody for joining us for Let's Paint Live tonight, where Jessie taught you in just about an hour how to paint spring palms. And don't forget to check out our plaidonline.com/Let's Paint page, where you can find our whole free online education program. And also check out our Let's Paint Facebook group. Again, it's a great community of artists where we're being interactive and people are supporting each other, and it's a great place to go, so you'll want to join that. And then we're going to give you a preview of our next Paint Night Live for April, which is crazy to say April already this year. But April 2nd, we will be live at 7:30 p.m. and we are going to be painting Evening Cherry Blossoms. So we're very excited about this. Again, another beautiful spring painting. And we will be using the Let's Paint Live kit. So the 24 colors you can purchase comes in the kit with the brushes. You'll go ahead and get your canvas, your wood, or your regular traditional canvas. And we're also going to be painting with Q-tips. Yes, we are. So that's something we haven't done. It's really fun. So, you know, again, if you're having me time, staying home with your friends and family, you want to gather all your supplies and be ready to go on April 7th or on April 2nd. So anyway, thanks everybody for joining us live, and we will see you next month. Bye. Bye. Thanks.